All right, I think I'm going to go ahead and kick us off here. So please welcome everyone to the live Q&A with Dr. Brenda Jegatheesan. Thank you, Dr. Jegatheesan, for that wonderful presentation. I know people in the chat were loving it. So now is their chance to ask a few questions live into the source. So if you are just joining us, the way to ask a question is to below, there's a Q&A button. Click it and enter your question there. I will be reading them out live to Dr. Jegatheesan, and we will just get through as many as we can, and we will go until about 11:40, at which time we will have a minute to switch over to the Partnering with Practitioners panel. So welcome, Dr. Jegatheesan. Our first question says, it's from Sarah. She says, thank you for your presentation. Through your research, what have you found are some of the specific benefits to children in traumatic situations stemming from their bonds with animals?
Well, that's a great question. Children in traumatic backgrounds, basically for most part, either whether it's domestic violence or refugee status, having fled their countries, they have seen some of the worst side of human nature. So they are left with no hope, very low self-esteem, and a sense of despair in them that tomorrow may not be better. So when they interact with animals, like either it's a cat or a dog or a bunny, firstly, they feel a sense of comfort and a sense of security just by virtue of interacting with the animals, because the animal is just quietly and calmly allowing them to touch the pet. A lot of the children tend to talk with them under these circumstances. After they've established a bond with them or some sort of a relationship with them, they tend to understand that this animal is for them, non-judgmental, not going to be able to say any of the things that they might have heard from their human relatives or friends, and they start confiding in them. So my studies with a range of cultures, children from traumatic background, I have found, have disclosed to me that they find comfort and a sense of relief by having conversations with the animals. They're able to open up their heart and explain everything that's going on in their lives, as well as how they feel, and also sort of consultation with their pets in terms of what tomorrow might look like, asking the rabbit or the hamster or the guinea pig or their dog as to what do they think about what do they think their future will be like, and somehow be able to imaginatively get a sense that tomorrow will be better by the sheer secure nature of that interaction and that relationship. Hope that helps.
The next question is from Claire. It says, what do you hope to see in the future research about cross-cultural human-animal interaction?
I think right now, well, for me, actually, right now, I have studied perceptions, interaction styles, and the different variations in terms of how they're introduced to animals and how they're able to provide certain certain opportunities for children to be able to interact with pets. Like, for example, what sort of settings do parents create for their children to be interacting with animals? But I think what is really needed is to have a cross-cultural section which intersects with socioeconomic status, life experiences, what kind of prior interactions that they've had with the animals, and what was the nature of the interactions. So I think getting more sense of the animal interaction into the cultural context, and whether or not the child's experiences has changed the interactions either for the negative or for the positive based on their home and community experiences generally with animals. So socioeconomic status, family involvement, community involvement, what the child has witnessed at home or in the community, and how this has impacted with how the child perceives a relationship or his relationship and acts accordingly.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. Our next question comes from Jill. She said, beautiful presentation. What thoughts do you have on how we can sensitize people who do not get the significance of the bond between people and animals?
Could you say the last part again, Maggie?
Yes, absolutely. What thoughts do you have on how we can sensitize people who do not get the significance of the bond between people and their animals?
Okay. So I was just talking to Maggie earlier that even in my own career trajectory, I had to continually convince people that this was a legitimate area. It was scientific enough. There's lots of work being done to the disbelievers, actually. But sometimes you have to come to understand that you can never change people's mind, some people's mind. But what you can do is pursue with your work and showcase the work that you do in the context of research and in the context of service, and how children perceive them as well. So the more you have to become an advocate for your own work. You have to advertise your own work. You have to emphasize and be bold and brave to say this matters. Look at the evidence over here. So the one way is that if you face these hardcore non-believers, don't let that affect you, because they tend to be a small percentage and maybe they might come around. But your focus is to get your material and your results and your work out there so that the rest can see it, and somehow by virtue of chance, the non-believers will come on board.
It takes perseverance. Our next question comes from Belinda. She says, how can we influence more countries to have positive pet policies? In the UK, we are finding that people are being forced apart in times of crisis simply because the housing providers do not allow pets in temporary or emergency accommodation. It's slowly changing, but it's too slow and we need a paradigm shift.
Okay. So I want to emphasize that even having the best policies sometimes does not necessarily work in favor of those who live in that country. So for example, India, I'm giving you an example of the place that I come from. India has in its constitution protection of animals in all capacities: wild animals, domestic animals, pets, even community, or what is known as otherwise street dogs. From the constitution, the Animal Welfare Board of India actually have laws that strictly says, for example, in relation to a question on pets and housing, that it is illegal and unlawful for anybody, landlords or condominium management committees, to prohibit a tenant from having a pet in their home. So if I was a tenant in India and my landlord says you can't have a cat or a dog or even a hamster or whatever, it is against the law. I can file a police complaint against that person and take legal actions. Now, I'm right now working very aggressively in the sense of pursuing a lot of cases that's going on in India, because I do a lot of work of making sure that pets and housing, trying to understand how much of the law and the constitution, what it says about the pets and housing, is followed through. Well, the law is there, but there are still landlords who do prohibit tenants from keeping pets. And the system sometimes in certain states in India is flawed. So the police don't take action if the tenant files a report. There is some sort of corruption as well. Well, we have a wonderful prime minister who's actually brought to significant extent a halt on bribery and the other not so good aspects where one can kind of grease the hand of a police officer and say ignore that. But it still happens and people are still fighting. And the idea of pedigree, purebred dogs versus mixed breed dogs also matters. So if a landlord thinks that his tenant has a golden retriever and that is a social status for him to say, hey, I have a tenant that has an amazing breed, he'll allow it. But he might not allow a mixed breed dog, which is against the law as well. So I think, to answer your question, policies must take into account the local settings and how it plays out over there, and be able to take into account every single aspect of the community and the system, whether it does support the policy and get them on board to endorse it 100% wholeheartedly. If you just create a law and pass it, if you just create a policy and hand it out, and there are these little bits of nitty-gritty groups of people who make a difference as to how that can be carried out, and they're not on board and they're not bought into the mission of what you're trying to say, then it's a long shot for it to be able to be very successful.
Absolutely. So we have about 1 more minute. So I will, I'll try and read this question and see if you have a brief answer. So the question comes from Kathy, and it said, I work with college students who've had to leave their pets at home to attend college. They often come visit my therapy dog in order to connect with an animal while at college. Many college students have developed trauma and really the loss of their companion animal at college. What do you notice about the impact of therapy animals or dogs on college populations? I know that's a big question. So I guess if you have any high level thought on it.
So I'm trying to understand, is a person asking whether the dogs that come on campus helps the college students? Is that
I
what
think
it
so,
is?
yeah.
Okay, so I think it helps the college students, but I don't think it helps the dog or the animal visiting dog in some instances, because in some cases,
It's telling us it's time, that timer.
Okay, is it time then?
It is, but I'm happy for you to finish your thought and then we can proceed.
The reason I say about animal welfare is that it will definitely work for the benefit of both if it's well planned. Take my college, for my university, for example. I've come into corridors where there is about 100 students between exams in the corridors with 2 dogs, and they're all surrounding the dog, and you can see the dog panting and it's stressed out, etc. So I think the students benefit, but somehow the way it is organized, it is unfavorable towards the dog or whatever other pets that they bring to such situations. So so it's hard for me to say in the context of that mutual benefits for both, because both ends of the lease actually matter. So, and it's hard for me to say how much of benefit are the students getting when they are not cueing into the signs of signals that the dog or the visiting cat is able to project onto them. So overall, my view is that the welfare of the animal has to be taken care of, which will enhance the benefits that the students get from that interaction.
Very well said. I do think it's about the welfare on both ends that can enhance one another. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Jegatheesan, for your talk and for your time today.
Thank you.
That's wonderful. So at this point, we invite people to head on over to the Partnering with Practitioners panel. Thank you, everyone. Bye.